All right, today we're going to dive into a new model for a field many of us are familiar with, longevity medicine. The Harley Street Institute is really reframing the entire discipline, and we're going to break down exactly what that looks like.
This quote, it really hits home, doesn't it? For so many of us as clinicians, that term anti-aging is just loaded. It immediately brings to mind cosmetic treatments, maybe some protocol-driven functional medicine, or even that whole biohacking trend. Let's be honest, it's a field just filled with noise.
But the Harley Street Institute is working to cut right through all of that noise. Their entire goal is to move past the hype and really reestablish this as the rigorous medical discipline it should be, one that's grounded in serious science.
So what does that actually mean in practice? Well, here's our definition. You'll notice it's not about reversing time or finding miracle cures. The key words here are regulation, resilience, and the slow loss of physiological reserve. This is the language of real clinical medicine.
This really brings us to the core of their whole curriculum. What are they actually teaching? And it all comes down to a fundamental shift in how we're trained to see the aging process itself.
The traditional view often treats aging like this checklist of separate problems, a failing heart over here, a metabolic issue over there. HSI just rejects that. Instead, they teach aging as this interconnected systems process, where absolutely everything from cardiovascular to neurocognitive is linked.
And this gets to the heart of what makes this so proactive. The goal isn't to just sit and wait for a diagnosis to pop up. It's to train clinicians like you and me to spot the subtle early signals, things like burnout or blood pressure variability, as indicators that a system is under strain long before any disease threshold is ever crossed.
Now, to do this, they use a central concept, the phenotype. But hold on, in this context, a phenotype is not a diagnosis. Think of it more as a pattern. It's a way to describe how our core regulatory systems are expressing themselves over time. It's about how a person is functioning, not what disease they have.
And they make this point so explicitly, which is absolutely crucial for clinical practice. Phenotypes are not new boxes to stick patients into. They're not labels. They are simply a more sophisticated interpretive lens for understanding a patient's trajectory.
Okay, let's make this feel a bit more concrete. Take what they call the high drive or entrepreneurial phenotype. We all know this person, right? From a regulatory perspective, you see high dopamine and stress tolerance early on, but also circadian disruption. So what are the early signals? Burnout, sleep delay, cognitive fatigue. And long-term, this pattern is associated with cardiovascular strain. The key insight here is that it's not a personality type, it's a regulatory trajectory with predictable risk.
Okay, so that covers the what. Now let's talk about the how. How is this complex material actually taught? This is where HSI's modern learning model, I think, really shines.
It's a blended model that's really designed for deep learning, not just memorization. It starts with structured written material for that solid academic foundation that's reinforced by curated video lectures. Then you get reflective audio learning to help integrate these really complex ideas. And finally, there's an AI-guided academic tutor that helps you connect the dots and test your understanding, all within clear, safe boundaries.
Now, what's so smart about this is how the assessment perfectly mirrors the philosophy. It's not about rote memorization of facts. The assessments are case-based and reflective, specifically designed to build your clinical reasoning and interpretive skills. The stuff you actually need in practice.
The whole pathway is it's logical, it's progressive. You start with the certificate to get the foundations of aging biology down. Then the diploma dives into how these patterns actually show up in real patients. And finally, the fellowship prepares you for leadership, getting into the advanced science, and importantly, the ethics of the field.
So all of this leads to the big question, right? Why does this model really matter? How is it truly different? And what could it mean for the standard of care?
This slide really puts it into perspective. Traditional medicine, for the most part, waits for a diagnosis before acting. A lot of functional medicine models can be very protocol-driven, jumping pretty quickly to an intervention. The HSI model tries to find that unique space in the middle. It's all about interpreting the patterns before disease, which allows for a much more measured and thoughtful clinical approach.
So what's the core advantage here? Well, it's a model that's built on realism and restraint. It respects biological limits, it prioritizes signals over hard diagnoses, and it actively works to avoid over-medicalization. But maybe most importantly, it reflects how our patients actually show up in the clinic, with these complex, overlapping signals that don't fit into a neat box.
And this quote just sums up the ultimate benefit for us as practitioners so well. It's all about building superior clinical judgment.
The end goal is better interpretation, better timing for any intervention you might consider, and a really strong sense of ethical restraint, which is just so vital in this field.
And so, we come full circle. By focusing on systems, on patterns, and on clinical interpretation, HSI is working to establish longevity medicine as the serious, credible, and responsible medical discipline it really needs to be. This leaves us with a final thought to chew on. As medicine continues to evolve, what's really going to define our role as clinicians? Is it going to be waiting around to treat an established disease, or will it be the sophisticated skill of interpreting a person's entire trajectory long before a diagnosis ever arrives? This model certainly suggests the future lies with interpretation.